Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, taking a tour of Oak Hill Iron Works, the factory where Big Blue power hammers are made. This right here is one of the coolest tools in the knife makers and the blacksmith's arsenal. It's a power hammer. So today, a big treat. We're going to Morganton, North Carolina to visit the home of Big Blue power hammers. If you're not familiar with power hammers, they're basically just what you see here. Big powered gizmos that replace the old-fashioned hammer. A couple of weeks back, I traveled to Big Blue with my friend Mark, who was buying a hammer from Big Blue. Now, I talked about the trip a little bit in an earlier video, but today we're focusing on a tour of the facility. Like I said up top, the actual business is known as Oak Hill Iron Works, and you'll see that there's a lot going on here besides blacksmithing and power hammers. So let's head inside and meet Andy, our guide for the tour.
So I'm Andy with Big Blue Hammer, and we're here today to forge some steel, right? This is actually, the business is Oak Hill Iron Works, right? That's our custom ornamental side, and Oak Hill has been in business for about 30 years making custom ornamental, and about 5 years into that we started building power hammers, right? Sort of out of necessity. You know, because the owner needed one, and there wasn't anything really particularly great on the market at the time, you know, in the form of like a utility hammer. So we started building the Big Blues, started selling those in like '97. The original shop is down below us, or was on a site down below us, and they built this, you know, right around 2000 and moved up here. And we've been building hammers here ever since. This is like the biggest one-man shop that you'll ever see like 20 people working in, right? So we've got our forging area over there. Kind of in the front of the forging area is where we'll keep the utility hammers, right? Then we've got a couple of presses off to the side, one specialty, one just sort of a normal 50-ton press. And we've got a couple of big Denison presses we don't use as much anymore in the back, and a couple more hammers in like a hydraulics room back there. Now we use it. I mean, you see it's got fresh scale on it. It's a 300-pounder. This one I think came out of Wilmington. And Dean got it, and they had it like all painted up weird and everything. This is the one they would practice on before they went to the big hammers. The single pieces are usually made to be like installed on a ship or something like that. Our main layout table is here. We try to keep everything in the shop as modular as possible, right? So we got a lot of stuff on wheels so we can move it around, right? But yeah, one main layout table here, another layout table there, drilling and machining back in that corner, and then material handling over here. Yeah, so let's tour through the grinding room. This is stuff y'all will be really familiar with. From like the blacksmithing side, it was this big decision to make this like, you know, grinding room that was all by itself. This was like, you know, 15, 16 years ago, right? But for us, being able to keep all the dust and everything out here is really good. Just got one Bader grinder set up in here. Now we've got an Ameribraid that we use and a couple of custom setups as well. Most of this is used for die grinding and hand hammer grinding, right? That's what we pump a lot of stuff through. But because we're doing custom ornamental too, it's really nice to have that like finishing ability too. Again, like when we first got into this, like the 2x72 like revolution that we have now, you know, even like 10 years ago, I'm sure you know too, it's like there wasn't nearly as much available. So this is some of the woodworking area, and we'll pop our heads in here. We do live edge slabs, and part of that whole process is you got to kiln dry them. So we've got a vacuum kiln in here, but you know, you start out with a super thick slab, you let it dry for like a year, and it gets all warpy, and you flatten it and flatten it and flatten it. So we've got a panel router that we've like restored, an old Onshrewd router that has a pretty high horsepower head on it for being able to flatten material. So they'll go through and just take fine passes off of this until they get them just dead flat. you know, a lot of live edge slabs you buy, they're not really fully dried, right? So, you know, you put 4 iron legs on a table you've made out of it, and it picks up one of the, yeah. So like you have to like break down that bound moisture that's in them, right? And it'll let out a lot of the stress in like weird ways, right? So you'll see on some of these boards, they just like bump up in the middle, they'll check up, and we just keep, you know, dry them, flatten them, dry them, flatten them, you know. And that's where the thing that's on the other side of that room is a vacuum kiln, so it can remove all of the air out, right, and heat it and drop the humidity and really pull that moisture out in a way that it can't get back into that wood. So this is where tabletops, all of the like joinery, epoxy, and everything sort of comes together. And with the epoxy, like we have for Oak Hill, they have their own line of epoxy. They worked with a chemist to figure out this sort of deep pour epoxy, and they were doing this before that became like a huge thing, right? Now you see a lot of it, and they're different, you know, a lot of different aspects of it. But we were going through and sort of figuring this out on our own. And this had grown out of the iron side of the business, you know. So I guess what all have we got going on, Francisco?
Yeah, like right now we finished this walnut table.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. And this is the bottom side. And then we got some cookies. We in the process the filling with epoxy. The process putting epoxy on it is real long because all those cookies, they has like 1,000,000 cracks on it, and you want them solid nice. So it takes you between 2 to 3 days to fill.
They got a Peterson sawmill at first, right? And that was sort of their first endeavor into it. It's one of these things where you can like break it down and pack it up on the back of a truck in an afternoon and take it somewhere and be able to cut with it. And you know, so they had it up here for a while. They built this little shed here, and you can see the beams are spaced out unevenly. This last set of beams, right? They left an opening, and the opening left like, you know, 4 or 5 inches to the capability of the saw, right? So of course, if you tell people that you can only accept a 10-foot log, right, then they're going to bring you 10-foot logs that are 10 foot 2 inches, right? But this one's phenomenal because it'll roll the wood for you and everything. One guy can operate it 90% of the time with just a little bit of help from somebody instead of having to have a piece of equipment and 2, maybe 3 people on the other sawmill. And this one's a band mill, so it's a little bit more fragile, right? But at the same time, it does really, really good.
How long do y'all usually typically let them sit before you?
It can, well, I mean, we can accelerate the process some with the kilns, right? We have a solar kiln there. That shipping container is a scientific kiln, and then we've got a vacuum kiln. And the vacuum kiln, you can take a dried log and get it into somebody's house in about 3 or 4 months. Well, and this is another one of those where, you know, we tell these scrap yards, just keep an eye out for cool stuff, right, and bring it to us. And they dumped that off, and it sat over in that pile for a couple of years, and everybody kept saying, like, that looks like a spaceship, right? We should do something with that. And I guess this week was the week, you know?
Rounding up the tour of the facility, Andy gave us a little walk around of the Big Blue Hammer itself.
This is a good spread. He set out a 110 and 155. I know we're kind of talking about like which one you wanted to go with, right? So this kind of puts them side by side. But you can see like with the 155, it's physically a couple inches taller, right? The head, of course, is 155 pounds, right? And versus a 110-pound head, so it's a physically larger head. And as that's moving up and down, right, you basically get an extra 2 inches of stuff that you can put in between the dies, right? And that's the big thing that, like, 110 hands down is our best seller and has been for the last decade, right? You can put about 4.5, 5 inches worth of stuff underneath it, which means if you're using really short tools and that sort of thing, you can fit everything in there. But if you get into a lot of fixturing bigger stuff. The 155 now is like 6.5 or 7 inches worth of stuff, and that lets you start to put a lot of tools, a lot of fixturing. And we've got some more elaborate dies now too that lets you do all of that. So 110 is tuned more for like to really sort of sip on air consumption. It's down to where it'll run like in a production shop on a 5 horsepower compressor with a 60-gallon tank. It does really good that way. We've got some people that run them on 2 and 3 horsepower compressors. This compressor will struggle a little bit, but it's all in what you do. The 155, on the other hand, is just tuned to power, right? 7.5, like it'll run off a 5, but it really needs a 7.5 or even a 10 horsepower compressor doesn't hurt, you know. And it hits hard, you know, as we'll see here in a little bit. So adjustment wise, right? The biggest thing that you have to adjust are your air pressure, right? And then you have a top and bottom limit switch on here, right? So the idea is the hammer has to go up until it hits that one, right? So it's got to go up until it hits this limit switch, and then it has to come down until it releases from that one, right? Now there are a bunch of different ways you can use that, but at the end of the day, that's kind of the long and the short of it. 155 is great is because it has such a long stroke too. You can really kind of visualize that, and you can get away with just using one
really?
too.
Okay.
So like back in the day, like our hammers only came with one. Our 65 still only comes with one limit switch, right? So the hammer will go up until it hits that, and then it'll cycle back down. So this one's not actually in play there, right? The concept is you can't build a machine that'll never break, but you can make one that's easy to work on. For shops where this is a mission critical tool, we recommend they keep a set of them on the shelf, right? The cylinder for a production shop about every 3 to 5 years is going to need to be rebuilt, right? And they can send that in to have that done, but it's easy enough too to replace it. And the idea is it's all, you know, all Allen keys, all open and really easy to get to. So if you have to replace a cylinder, it's just 4 bolts and everything's quick connects, right? Many valves, it takes like 10 minutes to replace them. The older hammers would run just off of 1 valve, right? And they would, like, you'd run it like that. If you need more space underneath it, you just raise it up. And if you need less space and you want to conserve air, right, you run it lower. But really, at the end of the day, you want to have it just high enough to where you can get into a natural rhythm before you start hitting your steel, right? And it really is like as gentle as you can be with that. You can come down and crack eggs and, you know, pinch paper in 2 and close a matchbox and all that good stuff with it, right? Unless you just really need to make quick adjustments, you should always run these with the top of the stroke just about 1 inch or 2 above the bottom of the stroke. And what that's going to do, you don't really lose any speed in your timing there, right? But it creates a flat spot in the air timing system. And that means that you can back way off and you can get really smooth hits. Yeah, even with the smallest stuff, right? You know, and hot forging 1/8 inch is like no joke, right? But you can totally do it under this, you know. So that's kind of setting number 1, right? And you can move those up and down. And then setting number 2 is to start spreading them apart from each other. And that's where, like, if you're working on something really particular, your hands are really close, you want to let it cycle all the way up and all the way down. And then you can get full power at a very slow pace, you know. Or you can even get a single hit if you want to, you know. And for stamping, that's the way to go. But you can go to the moon tuning that in and getting it just spot on if you're really, really particular about it. Basically, you adjust your air pressure. Low air pressure is going to make it more sluggish, right? Higher pressure is going to make it more crisp, right? You can adjust the valves for your height right?
So you could adjust the valves and the air pressure, drop that, and get really soft blows if you were doing something really interesting.
And the 155 runs all the way from about 160 psi down to about the mid to low 40s, right? So you can crank it way down there, and at that point, it's going to come down and hit and stay and really soak that blow. Which, if you're, we've got this lady up north who forges these massive bowls, right? And they're cold when they forge them. It takes 2 people to do it. Any bowl forging or any sheet metal forming, right? You don't want it to come down and hit and then move out of the way, which is what it's built to do. So you turn the air pressure down, it comes and it hits and it stays there, holds that piece of material true, right? And then gently lifts away. So yeah, air pressure, the valves, and then getting good with foot control. And that's it. You've got a gate valve back here, right? You turn that on slowly to start it up. Close this bleeder valve and then press down on the pedal 1 time. Now everything's sort of equalized, right? To shut it down, it's the same process again. Turn off the gate valve, open this up, that bleeds out the bottom of the system. Press the foot pedal, that bleeds out the top of the system. Now all of the hoses are depressurized. They're all quick connect, so you can take any of those hoses off or do whatever with it, you know? When you first start up in the morning, there's a filter regulator here, right? And that'll catch any water that's coming into the system and clean it. Whenever it's shut down, that will naturally drain, right? But it doesn't hurt to pull this off every once in a while, sort of check it and make sure that there's nothing awful down in the bottom of the bowl there. It's not full of water, right? Right beside that, you've got an oiler. There's a sight glass on the oiler, so you can see how much is in there. This just uses regular air tool oil, right? So it's the same stuff that you use in an impact wrench or anything like that, right? And it just slowly pumps that through the system. There's an adjustment as to how much oil that it's getting. We set that depending on what state that it's shipping to, right? For how much, but like sometimes winter or summer, it's good to check that every once in a while, keep an eye on it, right? So check your water, check your oil, just sort of give it a good visual once over and make sure everything is good there, that nobody's pulled hoses off in the middle of the night or something like that, right? And then we'll start it up. And then the hammerhead is guided by 4 pieces of brass, right? Okay. They're not tied up against there, but you'll just want to use a little bit of either like 30 weight motor oil or like a 90 weight, whey oil. You probably have some of that around,
I have
right?
Quite a bit.
Yeah, it sticks really well and it makes a nice cushion there, right? The gibs shouldn't ever have to be adjusted, right? It is possible to wear them out, but not in any reasonable time frame unless you've just got a lot of abrasives around, right? More often than not, what happens is the gibs will get tighter over time where people aren't oiling it on a regular basis and stuff builds up between there, and then it's just a function of like take it apart and clean it really well, right? So we just put a drop of 30 weight or whey oil on each one of those gibs, and just make sure that like they're looking clean. You can wipe it down with a rag every so often, right? This isn't one of those machines where it needs to be just dumping oil all the time, right? Just this thing will probably make like I don't know, 16, 20 kilojoules of energy, right? You've got to dissipate that somehow, and you want to dissipate it in such a way that like you're not ramming it all back up into the head. So if you have this like really compact active anvil, then you've got this problem that it's going to kick the head back up, right? And you'll see that over here sometimes too, like longer anvil means that, if you've got your material on there, it'll actually bump your material up in the air, right? It's colder material, you'll see it go back and forth. So you can get weird effects, right? Needs to be rebuilt, or the seals need to be replaced for the piston. And that's like this and Anyang's, they're built around the idea that you have a maintenance crew and you've got to, luckily we've got a crane here, right? So like to replace those seals, and
I've been thinking about it, I need to learn how to make tongs, because
Yeah.
I don't know how to make tongs, so that's going to be one of my first things to do is learn how to make tongs so that when I have something that I need to grasp that I don't have something to do it,
Yep.
I can make something to do that instead of having to order something.
Yeah,
so,
no, 100%.
That's one of my first things that I'm going to do.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've got a bunch of half-inch semi-truck leaf springs and axles, and I'm like, I just got lots of that old, you know, that kind of steel, and so that's what this is going to do for a while is just burn through stuff and just practice.
Yeah, yep. Well, and I mean the hardest thing on a pair of tongs, and I've taught tongs. Yeah, this is a set of ours, right? So like, you know, basically have that part already done out of both sides or just with a lump on the middle, and then you're focused on, you've got something you can actually hold on to, and then you're focused on just forging that chunk, right? So, which I mean that, you know, we could spend 3 or 4 days going over like every way to approach that there is, but this part, that's where you want to start, right?
Okay, let's hit the bonus round. Once the tour was over, Andy gave Mark a demo of some power hammer forging basics on Big Blue's 155 pounder. Let's catch some highlights.
With these, whenever you're forging and you let off, you can just burp the throttle for just a second, and that gives you enough time to slide back in and get back to your set point. So I'm going to smooth this up a little bit. Break my corners. And then I'm going to round it in. I could even do this cold. We'll take one more pass and really slowly sort of pass over it, because like right now it's nice and chunky, right? Which is sort of a nice, cool, low poly look to it, right? But the general idea is you want to forge as aggressively as possible up front, right? Because especially if you have the control to control the power, by forging aggressively, you're going to put more heat back into the material. I mean, this heat just goes on forever. So now that I'm done, I'm into the planishing phase. And I can really condense that down into a circle, right? And of course, like I've got a pattern because I'm executing the same thing, right? But if I didn't want that pattern, I can be a little bit more random about it and get rid of that. I mean, there are a million things you can do under a power hammer, but to get a good feel for its cadence and its control, right? And sort of get in tune with it, making the same taper over and over again is a really, really good bit of practice. Left foot forward is what we normally do. I mean, you can forge all around this thing, right? But left foot forward, right foot back, left hand forward, right hand kind of controlling the tongs there, right? So these are like your passive tongs from the side. I have to bend my knees to get down sort of low enough, depending on how far away that I am, because what will happen is if you raise up, again, the inertia of that piece will let the hammerhead just bend it right around.
Next, we got a few licks in on the hammer ourselves. While I was piddling around on the hammer, Mark loaded up his new Big Blue 155 and we headed back to Georgia. The one thing I might have liked to see that we didn't get a glimpse of was the actual assembly of the hammers themselves. Unfortunately, Andy didn't have too much inventory in the works other than the 2 hammers that they showed us when we came into the building at the beginning. So we didn't get to see the actual build itself, but still great tour and just a lot of cool stuff about what's going on there at Oak Hill Iron Works that you might not have thought you know, if you were thinking of a place that makes power hammers. Thanks to Andy and the other folks at Oak Hill Iron Works for taking time to show us around. By the way, I haven't done many videos of this sort over the years, so if you enjoyed the tour, let me know down in the comments, and I'll try to start working some more shop tours and factory tours into the mix here on the channel. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.